might be some other people trickling in. So welcome to what used to be a very unusual first day of class, but has certainly become a more usual first day of class for this semester. My name is John Boschini. I'm going to be your professor for media law and ethics. I'm also reporting for the people who are not able to make it. Again, I hope you guys come. I find it beneficial to actually be able to see you guys and actually be able to talk and have that conversation. For those of you who are viewing it, I do appreciate you guys having your cameras on. Last semester, I had 20 students, and all 20 of them had their cameras off and muted, and you just kind of feel like you're teaching into a void a little bit. And so I understand that, and so like I'm not going to make it a rule because that's weird. I'm just like, I got to see you guys, but I do appreciate that because it gives me some semblance of normalcy. So what we're going to do today is kind of talk about the outline of the class a little bit. I'm not going to jump in with too much heavy stuff. Not only can you guys drop this class after, and always have a few people that do and then add, because that's just how college works. But also, I don't want to kind of just jump in with a lot of substantive stuff that'll start next week. So we're going to kind of start with what this class is going to cover. And this class is going to cover all the things that you guys, not all the things, but most of the things you guys will come in contact with as members of the media. In past, I have discovered that some people in here want to be journalists. Other people want to work in movies or television more generally. They want to be editors. They want to be directors. They want to be writers. And so I'm trying to tailor the class to be a little bit 50-50. And more importantly, actually, we're going to be looking at the legal structure of the United States and how it treats speech and how it treats expression, and what can be regulated and what can't be. And what we're going to do today, after we get through the syllabus, is kind of go through some recent news events. All of them have happened within the past month and a half, and touch on the topics we will discuss, and hopefully you'll view the news a little bit differently. But let's going to start with the structure of the class. I'm not going to have you guys do something every single week. I don't like that. I don't think it's beneficial to you guys. I don't feel like grading a bunch of stuff. So my approach is I want you guys to have a couple of big things that you guys are going to be graded on, okay? And I want to teach you guys how, I don't want you to be lawyers. You're not here to go to law school. I was actually in this class about 12 years ago. I was in media law and ethics with Professor Podless, and it's what made me want to be a lawyer. And I don't expect anybody to go through this experience and want to follow me to law school, but I did appreciate that this was something where I kind of thought about the law in a little bit of a different way. So you guys are going to play act lawyers for a lot of your assignments. You're going to write a legal brief for me. That sounds scary. I don't mean for it to. I don't expect you guys to have, this mask was not the appropriate choice, I apologize. I don't expect you guys to be perfect, but you're going to be thinking about things analytically. You will also be doing oral arguments. Those have to be done for a speaking intensive class. Those also will be done via, that'll be done online. That'll be done via Google Hangouts, because otherwise I gotta do it in mass, and I find it's just more effective to do it via camera. So that will be entirely online. And then you will have a final exam, but the final exam, I try to make it as easy as possible, not easy, but I try to make it as simple as possible. Multiple choice questions, true false questions, and then a very brief essay, nothing too bad. You will also be required to watch 4 movies throughout the semester that touch on the various topics we're going to talk about. Right now, the plan is for those to be, okay. My hope is that those are going to be The People versus Larry Flynt, which is a Woody Harrelson movie about the founder of Hustler, and it's made by the people who did People versus O.J. Simpson. You will have to watch Network. You will have to watch Shattered Glass, and The Social Network. So all of those movies I really enjoy. And then you'll have Canvas discussions. Every semester, I have somebody who is otherwise going to get a B, B+, maybe even an A, and they just don't do the Canvas discussions, and they get a C or a C+. This is my way of substituting a participation grade. I do not call on people. I'm not going to cold call people and make sure you do the reading. I certainly hope you do the reading, because it makes the class a lot easier, but that's not my style. It makes everybody feel uncomfortable. So the way I get participation is you guys participating in these Canvas discussions. They should take 20 minutes of your time, and they're worth 50% of your grade. I am giving you 15% of the grade. Please take advantage. Also, it's 3 of the 4 movies are the ones that are actually counting towards your final grade. So if you decide you do not want to watch a movie, that's great. I'm only going to count the top 3, so it gives you an opportunity to skip if you so choose. The legal analysis, as you will see in the syllabus, the legal analysis, you have the do-over option. This is a written assignment. Again, no more than maybe 1,000 words, which comes out to about 2 to 3 pages, maybe 3.5 if you're really wordy. It's not a research paper or anything like that. You have the option to redo it for a better grade. So I think that this will be due sometime in late February. Turn it in, you get a grade. If you like that grade, you can keep it. If not, you can treat it as a rough draft and resubmit it. This is all designed that I want everybody in this class to get an A, okay? That won't happen. But I am not a professor who really enjoys giving bad grades, enjoys failing people. It actually really sucks, and I hate it. So if you guys are having trouble, please email me. Please ask for office hours. Please ask for us to talk over Skype or over Google Hangouts, because I want you guys to do well in the class. I can't promise that I'm going to get back to you within 5 minutes. I have a little 18-month toddler at home who takes up the vast majority of my time because he's walking around and will not sit still, but I'm going to try and get back to you. So that's my approach to how class is going to work. Additionally, I'm going to record these and put them on. I'm going to try to be better. Last semester, I just got frustrated and just put them all on YouTube and said, screw it. I'm going to try and be better about putting it on Canvas Studio this time around, but I might just say screw it and put it on YouTube again. Also, these, I'm going to pass around a seating chart next class, once everybody kind of has the final, but please sit in these seats again. And that's a UNCG rule because of contact tracing. So, the people that are within 6 feet of you, we want to know who those are. So if you need to switch seats, for whatever reason, you need to see the drop down, you need to see the screen better, whatever, let me know, that's fine. But you guys need to sit in the same seats that you are now, and we'll fill out a seating chart next class. Okay. Any questions so far from either anybody in the room or anybody on the chat? Yeah. No, good question. Final exam will be online. And final exam is going to be on OpenNote as well, OpenNote and OpenBook. Has anybody, and this is not really part of the class, has anybody taken the final exam where they've done all the anti-cheating provisions with like the camera watches? Is it as creepy as it sounds?
Yeah.
Okay. And I can't imagine they're particularly effective. I don't know how they would be. So rather than try and do all that stuff, it's just going to be OpenNote. It's going to be like, I just feel like I could have my phone right. I don't know. It doesn't seem effective to me. It seems, I don't feel as it's necessary, because the point of like, very rarely in law and even in media are you going to like expected to know the answer. Like, nobody's going to come up to you and be like, tell me what the elements of obscenity are, or what case determined that symbolic speech was protected or flag burning was protected. Like, nobody does that. Nobody does that in my job, and I actually went to law school. So I don't expect that from you guys. I expect you to know what we're talking about. I expect you to be able to analyze it. I expect you to be able to kind of apply legal concepts to real world problems. I don't expect you to memorize a ton, okay? And so that's kind of what the semester is going to look like. I use a PowerPoint. The slides will be posted on Canvas. I cannot promise you that they will be posted every week. I am not on top of the ball enough to do that, but they hopefully will be posted periodically throughout the semester. What I can tell you is, at the end of the semester, nothing that is not mentioned in the PowerPoint slides will be part of the final exam. So even though I will have readings, even though I have all of that, I'm not going to be like, haha, we didn't touch this in class, but back in February I had you read a piece of paper and it's buried in that second paragraph. You're expected to know that. That's not the way I operate. However, you're not going to simply be able to memorize the slides and get 100% on the final exam. So if a topic is mentioned, it's fair game, but it will be mentioned during class. It will be mentioned in the PowerPoint. Finally, speaking of readings, I don't, I did not assign a textbook for this class. That was intentional. I did put in the syllabus, though, that there is an official textbook. And the reason I picked that textbook is because you can download a free ebook version of our textbook via the UNCG library. So go into the syllabus, find out, and by next class, please download it as a PDF. I will also be posting readings on Canvas, court cases, things of that nature. I don't have a ton of reading, so the reading that I do expect you guys to do is relatively important. Any questions on any of that? Good. Sorry, I would not be able to make it through class without some kind of water. So what we're going to do now is, let me actually make sure there's nothing else I want to talk about with the syllabus. I don't think there was. But this is a weird semester, so I always like to double check. Oh, don't ask me for extra credit. Especially don't ask me for extra credit after the final exam. I am more than happy to work with as many people as possible, right? And ahead of the semester, if you guys need an extension, if you guys need an accommodation of some kind, I'm more than happy to do that. You guys are adults, and I want to treat you as such. What I don't really love is when people come to me when grades are due. I think it's like May 6th. They come to me on May 5th. Like, I have a D in the class. What can I do to not have a D in the class? That doesn't help me, okay? And if you guys run into a problem where you're going to, you had some sort of family issue, you have a medical issue especially, just be open with me. I'm not going to ask you to provide proof. I'm not going to do any of that stuff. Again, you guys are adults. Just be proactive, and I'm willing to work with you. Sound good, everybody? Cool. All right. I will not have an attendance policy this semester. I normally do have an attendance policy, but that just seems dumb. So you will not have an attendance policy. Oh, and then the inclusivity statement that I have. One of the things that I really like about this class, and I liked about this class when I was a student, is the exchange of ideas. You guys, with the best of my ability, will not know my political affiliation. You will not know how I feel about these various topics, and I will do my best to present all sides of an issue if there are multiple sides to be presented. Now, not all viewpoints are valid, but I do believe that there is not a lot of these topics. We're going to talk about how the Supreme Court, how the United States views these topics traditionally, but that doesn't make them right. It also doesn't make them wrong. I want you guys to be open. I will never punish you guys for an opinion that I do not hold. I've had, really, people very on the right of the political spectrum, very on the left of the political spectrum, and I really like those opinions, even if I don't necessarily share them. And this is going to be, and I think the free exchange of ideas is going to be very, very helpful, so long as it is done respectfully, and so long as it is done with, mutual. There has to be mutual. So I never want you guys there. When I teach these topics, I'm teaching what the law is, but I am very much curious as to what you guys think the law should be or any potential problems with it, because as we've seen, especially over the past 6 months, what is legitimate, what should be protected, what is valuable speech, what is valuable idea, and whether or not that can have real-world implications, I think has become incredibly, incredibly important. Read the COVID stuff and follow it, right? You guys seem to be doing a perfectly good job of that, but if you have any questions about it, let me know. And then finally, the most important thing I will say today, the syllabus, the dates on the syllabus are a guideline. They are not the definitive due dates for any one particular assignment except for the final exam. Everything else is subject to change. If we go online or I get sick or whatever else happens, things change. I also can ramble every once in a while and might get a couple of classes behind. So I don't want a panicked email, even though if you send one, I won't be upset or anything. But like if we get a little bit behind and we don't get to the first Canvas discussion on February 9th, that's okay. I will let you guys know well in advance when something is due, and there will be a slot for submission on Canvas, all right? So don't, the topics we're going to discuss, all of that, those are guidelines. We're going to give you guys a little bit of a preview. Sound good? All right, so that is the syllabus. Now what we're going to do with the rest of class, and I told you guys that I would not, does anybody have any questions on here? No? Okay. We're going to go through a couple of news items, and we're going to talk about how what we're going to learn in this class is going to influence these real-world events. So let me give you some background. In Pennsylvania, a few years ago, a freshman girl, so 14, 15 years old, tried out for, and just for the people online, this is the first, this is the Pennsylvania Penn Live article. She posted on Snapchat after she was denied a spot on the cheerleading team, essentially saying, fuck cheerleading, fuck high school, fuck all of these various things. Okay? And it was on Snapchat, it was to her friends. I believe it was on school property, but not in a class, right? It was just like you would talk to your friends in the hallway or something like that. School got wind of it and suspended her. So the question becomes, can the school punish speech that is made on school property, but not in the context of school in class? Now, we do have this thing in the United States that regulates or puts a stop on the government's ability to regulate speech. Hopefully you guys know what that is. Anybody give me an idea? It's an amendment, if that helps.
First Amendment.
First Amendment. Everybody says you have a right, First Amendment right to free speech? You do. Government can't kick down a door, throw you in jail because you say something that it does not like. But should that apply to high school students? You're under the age of 18, you're entitled to less rights than your adult counterparts. When you're 14, you can't drive, you can't vote, you can't drink, you can't serve in the military, right? So there are limitations on rights when you're under the age of 18. Additionally, can anybody think of an instance in which saying whatever the heck you want in school might be problematic? Getting up and just ranting and raving while people are trying to learn calculus is going to have a negative impact. We probably shouldn't allow that. On the other hand, you have to be in school. You have to be in school until you're 16 years old. There's absolutely a risk of giving the government unfettered discretion on punishing speech it likes and punishing speech it doesn't like. That's how we can lead to something like indoctrination or a acceptable viewpoint. You kind of learn what's an acceptable viewpoint from an early age, and that is an abuse of government power, especially when they have a captive audience. So the question the court has to ask itself is those 15 words, Congress shall not infringe on, of course now I forget the exact, but Congress shall make no law infringing the freedom of speech or the press. That's the First Amendment. Those 15, 16 words, how do those apply to a 14-written in 1791? How do those apply to a 14-year-old saying a bad word on Snapchat? And should we even care what they thought about in 1791, or should we view it from a more contemporary viewpoint of what is acceptable? And then doesn't that lead to a potential risk of unelected judges being legislatures, giving policy and overstepping their bounds and essentially circumventing democracy? And there are no easy answers, right? Because on one hand, you have somebody saying a bad word on Snapchat, but what if a student expresses what other students or administrations, what if they express an opinion that the rest of the student body finds racist or sexist or homophobic or transphobic? And who gets to decide what is racist? Who gets to decide what is sexist? Is it the administrator? Is it the other students? Is it the individual student? And it's not enough to simply say, oh, well, people can say whatever they want, because if you are a member of a group where slurs are being directed at you, are you going to be able to learn calculus? Are you going to be able to learn US history? Are you going to be able to learn William David Thoreau? No. And so there are consequences beyond just hearing something you don't like. It can legitimately impact somebody's ability to engage in learning. And there are no easy answers here. At least, I don't think that there are. Because I don't think you can simply say everything's okay or nothing's okay. There has to be a line drawn. And who actually gets to make that line? Okay. Next is, can anybody tell me who, and this gets a little bit into the weeds, of election law. Can anybody tell me who, oh, that's an point. Okay. Can anybody tell me who Sidney Powell is? Does anybody tell me who Lynn Wood is? Can you tell me who Rudy Giuliani is? Okay, who's Rudy Giuliani? Trump's lawyer. So, how old were you guys on 9/11? I always ask this. 3? 2? 3?
2.
Okay, a little depressing. But Rudy Giuliani was the New York City mayor during 9/11. That's kind of what he was known as. He was known as a federal prosecutor. But more recently has been Donald Trump's personal attorney in former President Trump now, attempt to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election. And part of the allegations and part of that court case was saying that Dominion, who is an organization who manufactures and helps maintain voting machines in the various states, most importantly, Georgia in this particular case, saying that they were either faulty or outright designed to switch votes that were punch the card for Donald Trump and switch them to Joe Biden. And therefore, Donald Trump actually won the state of Georgia, won the state of Pennsylvania, and therefore should have been the president and should have been reelected as president. And there were a lot of conspiracy theories and there were a lot of allegations made, but very little to no evidence was actually provided. And so Dominion sued, saying, yeah, we didn't do any of that. We run a reputable, reputable company. We ran the 2020 election fairly, and we counted the votes correctly. And they sued under defamation, or libel or slander, which are hopefully words that you guys have heard in some context over the course of your life, but maybe didn't give much thought as to what it actually means. Now, defamation, we're going to learn about what is defamation. Who gets to sue? Dominion is a company. Dominion is suing because they feel as though the company's reputation, has been harmed. And we'll look at how the First Amendment and how the First Amendment, as interpreted by the Supreme Court, has evaluated defamation in the past, and how there has been an incredible amount of skepticism towards defamation suits, especially when it comes to matters of public concern, elections, social justice, wars, politics, things of that nature, because we fought a war against the United Kingdom to have the Revolutionary War so that we could throw off the shackles of the mean old King George. And one of the things that the United Kingdom did, or Britain at the time, is they would use these defamation laws to suppress speech and say, oh, you lied about us. And we're going to take all of your money. We're going to throw you in jail. We are going to use the power of defamation to suppress critical speech. And when you look at more oppressive regimes around the world, Saudi Arabia, North Korea, China, they use defamation as a basis for shutting down critical speech. There's always a real hesitancy to allow, to punish people for saying things that the government deems untrue. On the other hand, I think that, and this is when they actually sent a cease and desist letter to MyPillow CEO, and I just find it very funny that one of the biggest, a big player in election law of the past few months has been the CEO of MyPillow.com. But allowing people to say things that are untrue, that doesn't exist in a vacuum. Because we saw exactly 2 weeks ago, you feed enough people lies and get them angry enough, we have 5 people dead at the US Capitol. And so there's a trade-off. Do we prevent the spread of conspiracy theories? Do we prevent people from saying things that the government, in its own judgment, deems to be untrue? Or do we suffer the consequences of unfettered speech? And there are going to be consequences both ways. There just are. And we'll also look at how different countries evaluate these things. Defamation law in the United States is incredibly different here than it would be in the United Kingdom or France or Germany. In Germany, it is a crime to question the validity of the Holocaust. Now, I very much hope nobody in this class is going to make the argument that the Holocaust didn't happen. But in the United States, we're going to say the solution to somebody saying the incorrect statement that the Holocaust did not happen is to persuade them that they are wrong. That the answer to bad speech, the answer to harmful speech, the answer to incorrect speech is good speech, better speech. And that you win the argument against bad or harmful ideas by overcoming them through debate and the exposure of better positions, better facts. Germany's going to say no. Allowing the idea that the Holocaust didn't happen and allowing that to go through unfettered would lead to a rise in extremism, especially in the age of the internet. And it can have real-world consequences in the form of terrorist attacks or racial, gender, or religious violence, whether it be actual physical violence or through discrimination, through hate speech, things of that nature. So that is, and should we look at, and return to defamation for a second, should we look at type of speech differently? So should speech that is about politics be treated differently as saying somebody cheated on their taxes? Or that somebody, got into financial trouble, or that somebody is being unfaithful in their marriage? And the answer is yes. And then we have another whole new problem of what is political speech and what is private speech. So these are not easy questions that we're going to talk about as much as possible. Okay. Here's one I find super interesting that is mainly because I'm a nerd about this stuff. On January 13th, the United States House of Representatives impeached Donald Trump for the second time. Now, Donald Trump has been impeached twice. He has been acquitted once and is currently awaiting trial on the second impeachment. Impeachment is like an indictment. Once the House of Representatives passes articles of impeachment, you have been impeached. Bill Clinton was impeached back in 1998, I think, 97, 98. And Andrew Johnson was impeached in the 1860s, I think. It's only happened 4 times to 3 different presidents. And what's the point of impeachment? If somebody's convicted of impeachment, what is the first and most obvious thing that happens to that person? Like if a president, let's say in the middle of their term, a president is impeached, what's the first thing that happens to that president? No longer president anymore, right? And that is the primary goal of removal of office. What happened to Donald Trump's presidential powers at noon today? He is no longer president of the United States. So if the Senate moves forward and convicts Donald Trump for incitement to commit violence, which is what the charge is against him, the first thing that's going to happen is they're going to read Donald J. Trump is no longer president of the United States. Okay, he's already not president of the United States. Does anybody know, and again, now we're getting really into the weeds. Does anybody know what else can happen if somebody's impeached? Right. Right, so if somebody is impeached, then that requires 2/3 of the Senate. So from some civics, we have 50 Democrats that are currently senators. I think Warnock and Ossoff were sworn in today. We have 50 Republican senators. We're going to assume that all the Democrats are going to vote to impeach. I'm not a political strategist. I don't know that for sure, but that's a pretty safe bet. Basic math, how many Republicans are we going to need, or how many Republicans are Democrats going to need in order to convict Donald Trump of insurrection? 2/3 of the Senate is required. So how many are they going to need? 17, which is a tall order, right? I'm not saying, I don't know. I'm not a Republican senator. I don't know if that's going to happen. But let's say it does. Donald Trump is convicted of impeachment. And then you're absolutely right. The Senate, by a simple majority, can say Donald Trump can never hold public office again, not only as president, but as a congressperson, as a senator, as Department of Education secretary, right? They can say you will not be in federal office again. What impeachment cannot do is say that that person can never run for state office. One of the big things we're going to get into is the levels of government in this country. We have the federal government, we have the state government, we have local governments, we have city governments, we have governments in this university, right? You're bound by university rules and regulations, and the university is a government entity. And so we're talking about how all these things interact. But yeah, so a lot of this is going to be whether or not Donald Trump can ever run for president again, which it seems like he has expressed interest in doing. But there's nothing in the Constitution that says you can try a president when they're no longer out of office. You can convict a president who is no longer in office. There's also nothing in the Constitution that says you can't. And this was written in 1791, when we were 130 years until we determined that women were capable of voting. And we were 70 years away from determining that slavery shouldn't happen. So leaving aside whether or not as brilliant minds as Thomas Jefferson and George Washington were from a simple parliamentary procedure and structure of government, as impressive a document as the Constitution is, it leaves a heck of a lot of stuff unanswered. And so there's going to be a fight over whether or not the trial that's going to exist in the Senate is even constitutional. And that ambiguity is both an advantage to the United States, depending on how you look at it, or it's a disadvantage. And you're having really smart people, and if you read the article, which is a really good article, I encourage you to do it, you have professors from Harvard saying, yes, you can absolutely try a president once they're no longer in office. And you have professors from Yale saying, no, there's no way. How, like, that's dumb. Why on earth would you do that? And these are people that are much, much smarter than me. So we're going to, now, this is not a poli-sci class. I don't expect it to be a poli-sci class. But we can't talk about legal cases without going into how the legal structure works. And that'll be a lot of what we determine in the first part of this class, is what legal, like how the law works, how the law is tried, the difference between a criminal case and a civil case, state court and federal court. Okay. This one this one's a little bit more fun. Okay, so background. In 2015, there was a comic book collection, a writer and an illustrator at a comic book company, who decided that they wanted to write this book, Oh, the Places You'll Boldly Go. Now, you should look at this, and two already existing copyrightable pieces of art should spring to mind. What are they? Dr. Seuss and this little guy right here. Who is that? Or from what? Star Trek, right? We have not gotten into copyright yet. We have not gotten into trademark. Can I go out tomorrow and make Star Wars Episode 10 Luke's Revenge and release it in theaters? Does anybody think I can do that? Do you think Disney got to be a multi-billion-dollar company because anybody can make a Mickey Mouse cartoon? Although, as we'll discuss, in 2023, you will be able to make your own Mickey Mouse cartoon without Disney being able to do a darn thing to stop it. And in 2034, I believe, you'll be able to make your own Batman and you'll be able to make your own Superman because of that little thing called the public domain. But this case is going to draw quite heavily and quite obviously, without any sort of regret or shame or anything like that, from Dr. Seuss and Star Trek. And so in this case, Dr. Seuss sued, saying, we own Oh, the Places You'll Go, which is the Dr. Seuss book. And this is a ripoff of our copyrightable intellectual property. Mr. Gerald and Mr. Templeton said, well, okay, we're not going to sit here and say it's not based on your pre-existing work. That would be kind of a bold-faced lie. But we think it's fair use. Fair use is something that you might have heard of before. And so one of the things we will look at in copyright is what is protectable. What can you copyright? Can you copyright a biography of George Washington? Can anybody own the life story of George Washington? Can you own the life story of yourself? The answer is no. Almost certainly not. We'll look at and that's one of the reasons I had you guys watch Social Network, is because it says Mark Zuckerberg. It says Facebook. These are real people, and we'll talk about whether or not you can own your copyrightable, your own life story. We will look at Robin Thicke and Blurred Lines and whether or not they ripped off Marvin Gaye and where the line is between being inspired by something, paying homage to something, and stealing it. We will also talk about the importance of talking to a darn lawyer. Because when you scroll through, the creators thought that Star Trek Primer would be pretty well protected by parody, but acknowledged that people in black robes may disagree. That's what they said when they did their GoFundMe. Do you want to know who they never asked about whether or not it might infringe on somebody else's copyright? A lawyer. And so we will talk about instances in which it is going to be a good idea to handle it yourself, and maybe when the first call you make should be to somebody with a law degree. Because this is not a class for you guys to be able to go represent yourself in federal court. And the importance of talking, of getting these things, thinking about these things ahead of time. We will also talk about what the damages for violating somebody else's copyright are. To give you a preview, I'm not going to ask anybody in here. I guess it's not really, like, pirating is not nearly as much of a thing as it used to be, right? Because you have Spotify, you have Netflix, like there's just more stuff that's available. But, you know, I'm not dumb enough to think that nobody in this class has ever pirated something. Gone on Pirate Bay or done BitTorrent or, you know, a while ago when there was Napster and things like that. And how there is a case in which a woman downloaded 30 songs from Napster and was sued for millions of dollars for downloading a couple of Britney Spears, NSYNC, and Jessica Simpson songs. And the real world consequences of these other things. We'll talk about how a drugstore did a Twitter post featuring Katherine Heigl and was sued for $4.5 million and lost. And so we'll talk about the consequences that can derive from not viewing these things in the appropriate context. We will also talk about Weird Al. Weird Al will be your final oral argument. And we'll talk about whether or not Weird Al's songs constitute fair use or not. Okay. And we're also going to talk about, and something that has really developed even just in the past 3 to 4 years in a way that it just didn't 10 years ago, you know, when I first started teaching this class or when I took this class, is the rise of big tech, the rise of the Amazons, the rise of the Facebooks and Twitter, and what is the purpose of these platforms? And how has the purpose changed over the past 24 years? Now, let me give you some background because, again, if you watch news, you kind of hear these things, or when Donald Trump had a Twitter account, he would just like tweet out, abolish Section 230. Very few people actually kind of went into what the heck this stuff is. So I don't expect you guys to memorize this. We will talk about it. But I'm going to go through it to kind of give you an idea as to the complexity of these issues. Section 230 is subsection 230 of the Digital Millennium Copyright Act rewrite of 1996. You're already bored, I can understand that. So, but this was in response to online publishers, at this time GeoCities and other forums, being held responsible for the postings of their users. And these users were not engaging in, and the hosting sites were not engaging in editorial control, right? It's kind of just like an old school message board. Nobody was removing content, nobody removing posts that they didn't like. They weren't, you know, saying that this is acceptable and this is not. And some state courts were finding these web hosts liable for the postings of individuals. And Congress at that point said, okay, that doesn't make a lot of sense because it's the person who was defamatory. It was the person who said something terrible. It was the person who was threatening or abusive or whatever. And they used the analogy of it would be like holding the person who built the road responsible for a car accident. Because all that these places were doing were setting up essentially online big bulletin boards. Because that's what the internet was back in 1996. We didn't have much beyond that. Amazon didn't exist. Facebook was 7 years away from existing. YouTube was 10 years away from existing. And this hasn't been updated. Section 230 hasn't been updated in 24 years. And so now we have the rise of Twitter and Facebook and Parler and Instagram and all these other places. And for better or for worse, and we'll talk about the benefits and drawbacks to it, Twitter and Facebook are not just bulletin boards. They regulate content on the basis of what they believe to be social good, right? So they're going, when the president of the United States tweets out that the election was stolen and that it was fraudulent, they're going to put a little thing that says, nope, that's not true. But that's editorial control, right? They're making a judgment call. They're making editorial control, which is different than being the hoster of a big billboard, big bulletin board. And then when they delete the president of the United States Twitter account, should that be allowed? Is it allowed under the current reading of 230? Should we allow for discrimination? We don't allow for discrimination on the basis of race, on the basis of gender, on the basis of gender or gender identity, or any of these other immutable traits that we have. Should we allow for discrimination on the basis of idea? There's an argument as to whether or not YouTube is censoring conservative viewpoints. That's a big thing as well. PragerU is a conservative, what they would call themselves, in a conservative education YouTube channel. YouTube demonetized them, saying you can't get advertising, you can't get you can't get ad dollars from your videos. And Prager said, but look at all these liberal things that are doing pretty much the same as what we do, Vox or these other YouTube channels. You're not demonetizing them. You're discriminating on behalf of us because we're conservative. And the question is that true? What is the difference between conservative speech and hate speech, or liberal speech and hate speech? And should YouTube get to decide that? Should Congress get to decide that? Should the Supreme Court get to decide that? And how do we address the fact that these tech powers are basically monopolies? There is nothing comparable to power of Facebook, YouTube. Facebook and Google, and just take Facebook and Google. I think they make up something like 80 to 85% of the advertising revenue on the internet. And the amount of power that can have in one can concentrate. And then we have the very real problems of people just making stuff up on Facebook. We're all wearing these masks because of COVID-19. And when we're in a public health emergency, should we allow for unfounded and unscientific, untruths to be peddled about vaccines or the effectiveness of masks or these other things? And should it matter whether or not it's some, elementary school teacher in Omaha, Nebraska, or should it matter if it's the president of the United States tweeting these things? I mean, these are real issues that I don't think often are effectively, in my opinion, effectively communicated. Because everything is a lot easier just to say, like, well, the Republicans hate Section 230 and Democrats think that Amazon should be broken up. I'm not saying either of these two things are correct or not. This isn't a poli-sci class. That's not why I'm here. But it is going to be a lot more complicated than that. And that's what we're going to be talking about. And these, for me, I find this stuff super interesting. I don't expect you guys to find it as interesting as I do. I annoy my entire family with how interesting I find little things in copyright, and I found that nobody cares as much as I do. However, what I do hope you guys get out of this class is that when we're looking, and last thing, we're also going to talk about the legal issues you'll face in your career. I've tried to beef that up over the past few semesters. What the hell does an agent do? What's the difference between an agent and a manager? What's an option contract? When you are talking about distribution rights, what are they talking about? When you're talking about profit participation, if you're a writer on a movie, what are you talking about? Should you create an LLC? Should you trademark your issues? What's a work for hire? Should you get a work for hire agreement from everybody? Should you only get it for above the line people? Should you get a permit when you go and film in a public place? Are permits constitutional? We'll talk about those, what I hope to be real world considerations. And so I hope you guys, I want you to take a couple of minutes, if you can, sometime over the weekend and think about, okay, what issues am I going to run into in my career? What legal issues have my friends run into or things like that? And if you want me to talk about it, I will. I want to cater this class to you guys. I'm actually given a fair amount of freedom of like what I got to cover. I got to cover media law and ethics. What that means is kind of up to me to decide. So if there's a legal issue you want talked about, let me know. I'm happy to incorporate it, but I got to have some notice. But otherwise, I appreciate you guys being here tonight. I'm really looking forward to the semester. It's definitely not the semester that I was hoping for back about a year ago, but it's certainly happy to getting started, and I look forward to seeing you guys on Monday. All right, again, remember where you're sitting. Please sit here on Monday, and we will go from there. Thanks, guys.